Hi, you guys. So today you are going to be working on the packet that we started on Friday. Remember that packet that we started and I was like, oh, guess you guys already know how to do all this. So you did 4.1E, which we will correct tomorrow when I get back. And then the next part in the packet that we are going to do is fractional unit rates. So if you'll just turn in your packet to fractional unit rates, your sub, whoever is in here helping your class, they have some extra copies of the packet. So if you weren't here on Friday, just grab an extra copy of this from the sub. So we're going to go ahead and go through the notes together, and then you guys will have an assignment to do on your own. You can work with a partner if you want when it gets to be that time. So first part of the notes say, at Sugar Shack, customers fill bags with assorted candy. The price of a bag of candy is determined by the number of pounds purchased. The price of Lillian's bag of candy is shown at the right. Describe a method to determine the price per pound of candy. So remember on Friday we talked about that word per being a super important word. And that word is so important because whatever comes right after that word per, that's always what you're going to divide by. That will always be on the bottom of your fraction. So if it's price per pound of candy, then we're going to do the cost of the candy divided by however many pounds of candy, right? And then to find a unit rate, remember the unit rate is the amount for just one, okay? So if we want to find out how much it costs for 1 pound of candy, and the cost for 1/4 pounds is $2.10. The way that we would do that is we would do $2.10 on top. That's the cost for 1/4. And then when we divide those, that will give us the cost for one. Now, lucky for you, you get to use a calculator. We talked about that on Friday. So you do not have to do all of this work by hand. So if you do $2.10 divided by 1/4, you get 8.4. Okay, so this would be $8.40 per 1 pound. Sorry, my writing's not very good with this little pen. So $8.40 for 1 pound. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next part of our notes. It says the unit rate describes the amount for one. Okay, so we want to say unit rate is always the amount for one, or the rate when the denominator is 1. Okay, so remember that whenever you're looking for unit rate, you want the denominator, DENOMINATOR, to be a 1. Okay? Example, it's 27 cents per 1 ounce, or 40 miles per 1 gallon. Okay, so let's go ahead and look through these sample questions. We're going to write the unit rate. The thing that's different about this than what we were working on Friday is that for these ones, the unit rate is just going to end up being a complex fraction. To find it, you'll have a fraction divided by another fraction, or you may have a decimal divided by a fraction. So here we go. Marcus walks 1/3 of a mile in 1/6 of an hour. If Marcus walks at a constant speed, how long will it take him to walk 1 mile? Okay, so when we set up our unit rate, we are wanting to know the time it's going to take for 1 mile. So that means whatever we know about time, that has to go on the top, and then whatever we know about miles, that has to go on the bottom. So if he walks 1/3 of a mile, 1/3 is going to go on the bottom, and then he does that in 1/6 of an hour. Well, that's the time, 1/6 of an hour. So this is how we're going to find our unit rate. So we take once, and this is called a complex fraction. Remember, anytime you have a fraction divided by another fraction, it's called a complex fraction. So When you're putting these in the calculator, just use your fraction button. So you're going to do 1 fraction button 6, and then you'll do divided by 1 fraction button 3, and then that is going to give you 1/2. So it is going to take him 1/2 of an hour and then that is per 1 mile. Go ahead and look at the next one. At the grocery store, 2/5 of a pound of grapes costs $2. What is the price per pound of grapes? Now, we're going to look for that word per, because if it's asking for the price per pound, that means we are going to do the cost on the top and then per pound. So we want to do pounds on the bottom. We want to know the cost for 1 pound. Okay, so let's go back to our problem and figure out what we know about the cost. We know it costs $2, and that is for 2/5 of a pound. So we have put the 2 on the top, we put the 2/5 on the bottom, and when you take your calculator and you do 2 divided by 2 fraction button 5, you get 5. Okay, so that means it is going to cost $5 per 1 pound. So make sure when you're doing these unit rates that you always write the rates. Okay, let's look at number 3. Robert is going on a 2-day canoeing trip with his outdoor adventure group. Robert paddles at a constant speed and travels 3/4 of a mile in 15 minutes. Create a table to determine how long it takes Robert to canoe 1 mile. So there are different ways that we could do this table, but let's just break this down into increments of 5 minutes. So let's see how far he's gone in 5 minutes, how far he's gone in 10 minutes, how far he's gone in 15 minutes, how far he's gone in 20 minutes. Okay, so if he can go 3/4 of a mile in 15 minutes, that means after 5 minutes that he has traveled 1/4 of a mile. And then after 10 minutes, he has traveled 1/2 of a mile. After 15 minutes, we know that he has traveled 3/4 of a mile. And then after 20 minutes, that is when he will finally get to 1 mile. Okay, and if we take and find the unit rate and we want to know how long it takes him, how many minutes for 1 mile, we would do the 15 minutes on top divided by the 3/4 on the bottom, and that's how we're going to get the 20 minutes in 1 mile. Okay, so we can say 20 minutes per mile. So now, on the first day of the trip, Robert canoes for 3 hours. And then it says, how far did Robert travel? Okay, so we know every 20 minutes he's going 1 mile. We also know that 1 hour is equivalent to 60 minutes. So that means in 1 hour, he's going to be able to travel 3 miles. And so then for 3 hours, we would say he's able to travel 9 miles. On the second day of the trip, Robert travels 6 miles down the river. How many hours did he spend paddling? Okay, so we already just talked about the fact that he's going 3 miles in 1 hour. So if he travels 6 miles down the river, that means he spent 2 hours. And then the last question, another member of the group, Matthew, can canoe 3/2 miles in 45 minutes. Who was traveling at a faster rate? So let's go ahead and figure out how many, what the rate is for Michael. Sorry, I'm getting the name mixed up. What the rate is for Matthew. So we want to know how many minutes it takes Matthew for 1 mile. So 45 minutes over, or divided by 3/2. I'm going to grab my calculator again. So 45 divided by 3/2 is 30. So it takes him 30 minutes to travel 1 mile. Okay, so who is traveling at the faster rate? So for this, we know that Robert is traveling 20 minutes. It only takes him 20 minutes to travel a mile, but for Matthew, it takes Matthew 30 minutes to travel a mile. So even though 30 is bigger than 20, because we're talking about who is faster, we would have to say that Robert is faster. Okay, so Robert has the faster rate. Okay, let's go through question number 4. Ignacia grows daisies and sells them to local florists. The daisies grow at a constant rate as shown below. Use the information to answer A through C. So determine how many inches the daisies grow in 1 week. So if we want to know how many inches the daisies grow in 1 week, then we are going to have to do height on the top. We want to know the height in 1 week. So that's how we're going to go ahead and set up our unit right here. So in 2.5 weeks, they grow 4 inches. So we do 4 inches on the top and 2.5 on the bottom, and that's going to help us figure out how many inches they grow in 1 week. So 4 divided by 2 1/2 is 1 3/5. Okay, so 1 3/5 inches per 1 week. Next question. Ignacia sells the flowers once they are 8 inches tall. After how many weeks can Ignacia sell the flowers? So if it takes 2.5 weeks to get to 4 inches, and she sells them once they're 8 inches tall, you guys can see that 8 is 2 times the 4. So we would have to take the 2.5, multiply it by 2, which would give us 5. Okay, she can sell them after 5 weeks. And then the last part of this question, how tall will the daisies be after 10 weeks? So there are 2 different ways we could do this. We could say 1 3/5 inches per week times by 10, okay? Or we could say, okay, well, if they're 8 inches tall after 5 weeks, and we want to know how tall they'll be after 10 weeks, we could just double that, and we can say 16 inches tall. Okay, last question. Crystal is making her family's famous homemade chocolate chip cookies. The list of ingredients is shown at the table at the right. While she was cooking, part of the recipe got covered up, and instead of adding 1/6 cup of butter, she added 1 cup of butter. Use the information below to answer questions 5 through 9. Okay, so instead of adding 1/6 cup of butter, she added 1 cup. So can you guys see that to get from 1/6 to 1, we would have to times by 6? Okay, so that's important for us to remember. So in the original recipe, we have that right here, there was 1/6 cup butter and 2/3 cup sugar. So when it says write the ratio of butter to sugar, that means we're going to do the amount of butter on the top and sugar on the bottom, if it's butter to sugar. Okay, so butter is 1/6. This is in the original recipe, and then sugar is 2/3. So that would be the ratio. How can you write an equivalent ratio of butter to sugar for 1 cup of butter? So the unit rate for 5 is if we take the 1/6 and divide by 2/3, that's going to give us 1/4 cup of butter per 1 cup sugar. So it says, how can you write an equivalent ratio of butter to sugar for 1 cup of butter? So if there is 1 cup of butter instead of 1/6, that means we're going to have to times by 6, which means that we would have to do 2/3 times by 6, which is 4. Okay, so for every 1 cup of butter, there has to be 4 cups of sugar. And we actually can get here by using this as well. And then the next question, how many cups of sugar should Crystal use now to keep the ratios of the recipe equivalent? Okay, so she should use the 1/4 cup of butter for 1 cup of sugar. Because if she already put 6 times the amount of sugar in the recipe, that means she's going to have to do 6 times the amount of sugar so that it turns out correct. In fact, she's going to have to do 6 times all of these ingredients in order for it to turn out correctly. And then it says, list the amount of each ingredient for Crystal's new recipe with 1 cup of butter. So if we take the flour and we now times that by 6, we get 15. So she'll have to have 15 cups of flour. That's a lot of flour. And then the chocolate chips, we have to do 1 1/6 and times that by 6. And that would be 7 cups of chocolate chips. I think there's like a cup of chocolate chips in a bag, I think. And so that'd be 7 bags of chocolate chips. Okay, last question. The next day, Crystal decides to make the recipe again, but this time uses 1 cup of sugar. Crystal thinks she can multiply the amount of each ingredient by 3 to determine the new recipe with equivalent ratios. Do you agree or disagree? And explain. Okay, well, it would be a lot better if she could just get the recipe correct, right? But she can't do this, okay? So we have to say disagree. So to go from 2/3 cup to 1 cup, you have to multiply by 3/2, which means that all of the ingredients would have to be multiplied by 3/2 in order to keep the recipe correct. Okay, so your homework is to finish just the 1 page. I know this video took a long time, so you guys just have the 1 page, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The sub actually has the answer key for this. So as soon as you are done with yours, go ahead and just go back to the sub and they will correct yours for you. And then we'll move on to the next part in the packet tomorrow. Talk to you later.